We have a Green Themes presentation this evening, and I'm very happy to welcome Pat Lindemann, our Drain Commissioner for Ingham County. Last time I heard Pat talk was about 10 years ago over at MSU, Fisheries and Wildlife, and I was delighted to hear some of the wonderful plans that he had in store, and now some of them have come to fruition and others are just around the corner. I think this is a great opportunity to hear a follow-on from last month's Green Themes presentation, which unfortunately I couldn't attend, but I did watch the video. It strikes me that while we didn't actually plan it this way, what we had was one Green Themes presentation about how the climate has been changing in Michigan, including how the rain is falling. And tonight, we get to hear about what happens after it hits the ground. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, and look forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. I always like to take these opportunities, I call them teachable moments. So a lot of people don't understand infrastructure, and they understand less about rain and the impacts of it, and so on and so forth. Generally speaking, we have 536 county and inter-county drains in the county. If you stretch them end to end, it would be somewhere around 1,400 miles. That would be from here to Miami, Florida, which is quite a distance. So my job and my staff's job is to try to manage those drains and keep them in working order so that so that property damage and life safety and health safety and welfare are preserved as best we can. Meridian Township has 181 of those drains, and there are 5 inter-county drains in Ingham County that you're associated with. So in whole or in part, you have about 181 of those 536 drains. In the Red Cedar Watershed, there are 236 drains that are in Ingham County that affect the quality of water of the river that runs through your township. There are just a little bit about the drain code. The drain code was first written in the first legislative session in 1838, and we became a state in 1837, and they passed the drain code of Michigan. We're the only state in the United States that has an elected official with its own law to manage natural resources and to manage infrastructure with the power to tax, the power to condemn property, and all of the other bells and whistles that are associated with that law. It's interesting to know that that law first was adopted in 1435, and it was written by a person by the name of Geoffrey Chaucer, of all people, and he was appointed by King Richard, I think it was King Richard II, to be the Commissioner of Ditches and Dikes of England, of all things. And he was asked by the king to, he was given a lot of power by the king to manage the waterways, basically, and all the dikes that were formed. And he was given the power to tax all the people on the land by the king to pay for it. And he wrote what's called the Common Law of England for water and riparian rights. And that law has been, when we had a revolution, kicked King George out of here, we kept 2 really good things from England. One was afternoon tea time, and the other one was that law. And in 1837, it became slightly changed, but because the principle is all the same, it became Public Act 40 of the state of Michigan, the Drain Code, which gives each county an elected official to manage infrastructure and water movement and so on and so forth. So we've done a lot of work in Meridian Township with the drains, and if you can understand 181 drains and what that means to your township, it is that Meridian Township is by and large a swamp that's been drained, and it has some problems with soil water and surface water movement, and hence the drains and the importance of those drains. So in the last 24 years since I've been Drain Commissioner, we have slowly started to, at the beginning, we slowly started to change our maintenance policies to be proactive rather than reactive. So we used to have reactive behavior in previous drain commissioners, and they didn't like doing work unless there was something that broke. But what that meant was it cost a lot more money if you didn't fix it and maintain it regularly, it's like a car that you don't change the oil in. It breaks down faster and it performs less. So we have stepped that up, and today this is one of the wettest springs that we've ever had in history. And the soils all over the county are really saturated. I had 8 inches of water in my backyard, and I'm up on a hill. So my soils are terribly wet and mushy and so on and so forth. And I've never seen it quite that bad. So to maintain that water over this last 24 years with a proactive approach means that we fix it first, and the flooding that you suffered this spring, if anybody had water in their yards or basement, would have been 15 or 20 times worse had we not taken a proactive approach over the last 24 years. That's the point. And we continue to do that. We set up protocol to do that now, so that it's regular routine. So we have several petition projects in Meridian Township that I think you should take a look at. If you haven't been over to Tower Gardens, you should. It's absolutely gorgeous. There's over 150 rain gardens in that project. It has been a screaming success from all points of view. There are 2 drains over there. One costs $2 million to build, and the other one cost 7 point something to build. And it's the largest constructed rain garden complex in the country that we know of. And it's here in Meridian Township, and it's been a very good success. It's cut the peak flow rate to the Looking Glass River down by 94%. And when the water goes in, we used to have probably about 60 to 70% of all those houses in that neighborhood had basement water problems, and their sumps ran 24 hours a day at times. And hardly any of the sumps run anymore. The water is captured, it's stored, and it's dissipated through the drain system, and it goes through all these rain gardens, and it evaporates through the plants. And very little of it winds up going to the Looking Glass River. So that's been a great success, and it's absolutely gorgeous if you get a chance to drive through there. Another drain project that I'd like to talk to you about, at least a part of it, is the Smith Drain. And we were petitioned, we successfully obtained a petition to fix the Smith Drain. It was generated because the tube under Okemos Road was collapsing. It was all rusted out and falling apart, so we had to rebuild it. If we rebuild it and made it larger, which we had to do to solve the flooding problems on the highway, that meant that we were going to flood everything downstream to a greater extent than it was currently with the old drain setup. So we readjusted some wetland complexes north of Jolly Road and west of Okemos Road. And I'm going to show you some pictures of those. We did that with the goal to develop and enhance the values and functions of those wetlands. And here's a before shot and after shot. So you can see the pond on the lower picture used to be just some swamp muck soils and so on. Well, we dug all those out and created, this is the first spring for that complex. So they're all planted with wetland plants, and they're built specifically to enhance habitat values, but they're, more importantly to the management of water, they're built so that they can handle that extra water by fixing the tube underneath Jolly Road. And we not only solved the flooding problem on the highway, but we also solved a lot of other flooding problems in properties along to the south of this location. The weir that you see right there is calibrated to allow only so much water to go out, so it protects everybody downstream and so on. There is another shot of the Smith Drain before and after. I think there's a remarkable difference. Don't let the green golf course looking lawn fool you. Those are really wetland grasses and so on. They're just now starting to come up, so it's going to be absolutely beautiful. And you have a biking path that goes through there, and this is a nice addition, I think, to that path and the people who want to walk it. Here's another shot in one of the open ponds that we have, and you can see it's full of water right now due to the heavy rain that we have. And the engineer, James Ensign, who is changed companies, he doesn't work for him anymore, but he did an extraordinary job, and Carla Close was the deputy that I put in charge of this project, and they went out of their way to make this very, very nice. So you ought to be very proud of this drain. There's another shot of 2 shots from different angles that show some of the ingress and egress out of the ponds into the main drain flow. The Ember Oaks project drain, if you recall, we worked on that for about 4 years in cooperation with the Conservation Land Preservation Committee here in Meridian. And the problem with that is these are before pictures. Water was coming down off of the development to the south underneath the railroad tracks and just screaming right through here, making all kinds of bad gullies, eroding soils, and so on. And when we were done with the project, we stabilized these banks. There was some of these cuts in the banks were big enough to drive a Volkswagen through. It was that bad. And it all happened within about 5 or 6 years after the development had gone in. And so we worked with the developer to retain more water, and then we stabilized these banks and made a variety of different streams and pathways and so on, and armored them with rocks and vegetation. And the project has been another great success, and I think it offers a great opportunity for the citizens of Meridian Township to recreate and go for walks and and enjoy that hunk of wilderness right in the middle of Meridian Township. Then the Moca Drain is another petition that we're working on, and we're getting ready to start construction this summer. And this drain, this is a map of the areas that flood in the Moca Drain. The Monoka subdivision, right up on the upper right-hand corner, is Lake Lansing. And the Moca Drain was built over 100 years ago. And the neighborhood that it supplies drainage to is some of the oldest housing that's in Meridian Township. A lot of the drains that are in the street are very small caliber clay pipes, butt joint pipes, right in the road. So we're replacing all of those, and we have to have a place to store all this water where it does no harm. So I'll give you some shots of some of the flooding that occurs. These are some of the shots of flooding that we're trying to avoid. And you can see how massive the flooding is. The shopping center in the lower left-hand corner of that slide is a clear indication of how much water is on Marsh Road and the intersection of Marsh Road and Haslow Road. And when we're done, we will have reached the capacity of storage within this watershed to store and treat before we put it into the Pine Lake Outlet Drain to the west, all of this water. And it should dry up a lot of houses. Now, we had to buy some property, and we're going to create some ponds and holding places for it. And we're in the process of negotiating for the last piece of property that we need. And when that's done, we put our final plans together, we go to bid, and we should be in construction mode this summer. Okay? This is a shot of the watershed, or of the drainage district that we're working on. Okay? And then I'd like to talk about the Red Cedar River itself. I just received a grant from DNR for $427,000 and some change to rebuild the parts of the river from Kalamazoo Street to Harrison Street, right on the edge of East Lansing and Lansing. And that project is the first of many kinds of projects that we're going to try to conduct along the whole stretch of the Red Cedar River. Part of our effort to create fish habitat and to make the stream more natural, which I think we're going to talk about the 100-year storm events and what impact they have on the hydrograph of a river in a minute. But the real problem is that over the last 100 years, we've developed the land in such a way that we didn't account for all the runoff, and the runoff just literally blew the river out. If you go onto MSU's campus on Farm Lane, you can cross that bridge. It's quite a big bridge. There's no way that you can jump from one side to the other. But in 1900, that was a narrow place. If you got a running head start, you could almost make it across the river with a jump. And it was that skinny. The Red Cedar River has been blown out, literally blown out. The banks have been blown away, and the hydrograph for that river is huge. When it rains, it peaks 6-7 feet in depth a lot of times, and then it goes back down to a very low depth, to inches. The trick is to keep the water, the flow of water off the land monitored in such a way where it hits I call it pre-Columbus rates of flow. Not pre-development rates of flow, but pre-Columbus. And I know we'll never get there, but it's nice to think that we could possibly get there. So I call it the pre-Columbus rates of flow. So that's our real target when we try to rebuild these drains, is to hold the water back and not let it go to the river. Even though they're pre-developed rates of flow, there are more gallons that come off the land simply because it might be moving at the same rate that it was moving to the river, but there's millions of gallons more than what went to the river before, because there was nothing in between to absorb the water or to transevaporate it into the space, into the air, or absorb it further into the ground. We've destroyed most of the wetlands by draining them, and we have to replace something that can mimic that kind of activity. So I'm a wetland lover, and we use techniques that are labeled low-impact design. They're rain gardens, bioswales, constructed wetlands, and a whole variety of other techniques in our toolbox that we use. So when we rebuild these drains, the 236 drains that I'm in charge of going into the Red Cedar River, eventually, probably not in my tenure, but the person who takes over after me will, keep those challenges in front of him or her, and strive to bring those rates of flow back down to the pre-Columbus rates of flow. And when we do that, the river then can stabilize itself. And that's the time when we want to go in and rebuild the banks and put some depth to the river and get the slope of the river and the slope of the flow back to where it should be. And then we can really call it a nice fishery. And Ingham County has a trail millage that they're working on. And part of that trail millage is going to be spent on a blue trail. And they want Red Cedar and Sycamore Creek to be part of that effort. And so we can make them canoe friendly and kayak friendly, then we can put more people and recreate and touch it more and be comfortable interacting with the river in a more positive way. These dams that are in blockages in the river that you see in front of you here on that screen, that log is 6 foot in diameter. We think that it fell into the river someplace around 1910, 1909, as near as we can figure. And it's been there ever since. And we yanked that out of the river just east of Hagedorn Road, near Indian Hill subdivision. And the water actually went down 2 feet. I could watch it go down. It was really kind of strange to watch that water just slowly go down. I stood there and watched it for about 2 hours, and it went down 2.8 feet when I pulled that log out of there. We pulled out the size of that log, about 7 piles of debris behind it. Shopping carts and picnic tables and all that crap. We pulled it all out from behind there and disposed of it properly. We have to date, I think it's 7 dams that we've taken out, and along the Red Cedar, and 1 in Sycamore Creek. And we're going to be taking out, I'm thinking, around 10 more, hopefully some this summer and then some the next summer. And if we can eliminate those blockages and put some flow patterns back into the river that are more in keeping with what it used to be, you're going to have a wonderful resource coming through your community. And all of that effort is being done through the use of the drain code. So all of these blockages back water up, and they impact the efficiency of the drain that's actually draining your subdivisions and so on, and your shopping malls. And the drain code allows me to go into the river and take those blockages away. So we're systematically going through the system, and we'll probably take about, I'm thinking in the next 4 years, we'll probably hit maybe 25 or 30 of them. And it'll change the course of that river substantially when we do that. Then we just have to work out a plan to maintain it with volunteers and so on. And the Paddle Club of Lansing is one group, and the Mid-Michigan Environmental Action Council is another, that they like to have volunteers go out, and we can take care of some of those smaller jams. These large ones like this tree here, though, you need some heavy equipment. You don't want to be near it when we're yanking on it. That log, I have to tell you, was water soaked. I don't know what it weighed, but it almost dumped over an extra large excavator with a large reach on it, and that excavator almost went in the river. We could hardly pull that thing out, but when it came out, you could hear the sucking sound in the muck below. It was a strange event, but it was kind of cool though. So you'll see changes in the river. A lot more fish populations will come. We're going to build fish habitats and so on using a variety of different grant mechanisms and over the next few years. So all in all, I have to say that the water system in Meridian Township, because of our proactive maintenance policy and the rebuilding of the drains that have been really badly maintained over the last 100 years, and the way that we've been doing it with low impact design has not only saved money, they're cheaper to build that way. They do take a little bit of maintenance, but it's hard to spend on maintenance the same amount of money you saved by building it with low impact design. And I'd just like to press this point home before I answer any questions. Just take the toll gate drain in Lansing Township. To fix that drain properly would have cost, the way that they typically do engineering projects on stormwater infrastructure, would have been somewhere between $23 and $28 million. I built the toll gate drain and rebuilt the Groesbeck Golf Course for $6.2 million. And we saved $18 million. If you take that, and it only costs us around $30,000 a year to maintain that system. We can maintain the system for like 550 years and not spend what we saved. I mean, that's really the way you want to look at proper ecosystem and infrastructure management, is from the long-term gain that you get from maintaining it properly. And you have to spend maintenance money. The maintenance money that we spend is all done in a proactive approach. So we try to fix it when it costs a nickel instead of it costing 10 nickels. And we find great success in doing that. And we have a system now where we're inspecting all of our drains once every 3 years. And I think we're doing a good job. I'm really proud of my staff for stepping up to the plate and meeting all the challenges that I've thrown at them. I would like to say too that we're getting ready to start on the Montgomery Drain. That's the Frandor one. I think that's going to impact Michigan Avenue and Grand River. It's going to be a destination place. There's about somewhere around $500 million worth of commercial development going in, and the drain bill will be somewhere around $30 million. But we're going to have, just from Grand River down to Michigan Avenue, there are going to be over 23 waterfalls coming through the system. We're daylighting a lot of the pipes that are under the ground, and we're making streams and creeks that are going to run 24 hours a day, all year round, evaporating the water, cleaning the water. We have a bunch of different techniques that we're using for pollution abatement and extraction. And that watershed, just to put it in comparison to some watersheds you may have here, the Montgomery Drain watershed is a little less than a square mile. It's somewhere around 2/3 of a square mile. And it's 80% impervious, meaning parking lots, roofs, sidewalks, and roads. And we've been studying it now for all the discharges have been monitored now for about 3 years. And I can tell you from my chemists are telling me this, these numbers, that there's between 50,000 and 75,000 pounds of pollutants that enter the Red Cedar River from that one watershed alone. And there are 236 of those along the Red Cedar River. This one being the worst, but the rest all have problems associated with it too. So we have to not only go after controlling volume of water, but we have to control what comes into it in the form of pollution and how we're going to discharge it back into the ecosystem so that we can enjoy it. And it just improves our quality of life in so many ways. So I guess with that, I will answer questions.
Thank you. Well, I know that one of our commissioners lives almost on top of one of the drains that you were talking about, the Ember Oaks, and is one of the people who recreates along that new trail.
Yes, I do. Yeah, it's definitely a very nice addition. I have experiences on both sides of the timeline previous to the project. And it was definitely a mess, and you really changed it up. I see people down there all the time having fun. And
that's wonderful. I just rebuilt the Bancroft Park in Lansing, and hardly anybody ever went there. And every time I go out there now, there's like 15 people walking the path. People in wheelchairs and baby strollers and bicycles. It's just fun. And I think that if we do that, the water that we have used to be called waste. We'd drain the swamp, you know, and we'd call it wastewater, and we didn't care whether it was polluted or not. That's one of our greatest resources, only second to the people that we have living here. And if we can manage that water resource properly, it's going to increase everybody's quality of life, just like the young gentleman said. Any other questions?
Questions down at this end?
Well, you know, we've been hearing from different speakers about the impact of climate change in a township like ours is more severe rain events, basically, and more likely flooding. I'm wondering, are you going to have to change the way you do business, or how does that impact what you do on a yearly basis or over the next 10 years or whatever?
Sure. We used to run numbers using a place marker called a 100-year recurrent, or a 1% recurrent storm, which is a 100-year storm. Doesn't mean that it happens every 100 years. It only means that it has 1% chance of happening in any given storm event. The storms used to be, years ago, more than likely the storm was wide, it was big, it rained equally everywhere, the clouds covered a lot of space and so on. Right now they're all microbursts, and you can get 5 inches of rain in a very small area, and that's a lot of water to handle, and sometimes it comes down in 2 or 3 hours. In the last 4 or 5 years we've experienced 4 inches and up to 5 inches of rain in small, maybe quarter of a mile areas. And what that overwhelms the infrastructure that we have in the ground today. So taking into consideration several desires that we have. One is to reduce the peak runoff going to the rivers and reduce flooding along the rivers, but also get rid of the water that we've created when we change the use of that land. Anytime we modify that land use, we have increased the flow going to the river. So we want to build our infrastructure in a way that holds that water back without flooding anybody and can handle those large storm events or downpours. And if you don't believe climate is changing, it is changing. You can trust me, I'm telling you, it's changing. I have to chase this water downhill every day. Every time it rains, I'm out there chasing it. And it's different than it was. It's not the same. And so when we rebuild drains with petitions or we build new drains, we're requiring, our standards are changing slightly, and then they're going to change big time here, and probably in the next year you're going to see our standards change altogether. We would like to hold back more of that water than what we've been holding back. One, the existing standards don't allow enough flow to leave in those microbursts, so you wind up with isolated flooding for at least 8 to 10 hours in any given subdivision, and it doesn't get away fast enough. And so we can do two things. We can enlarge the pipes and put it all in the river faster, which hurts our desire to make the flow consistent with the pre-developed conditions. Or we can rebuild the drains differently to hold water in different ways. In Delhi Township, I just finished a project called the Green 4 Consolidated Drainage District, and we used constructed ditches on a non-curbed road. And I'm telling you, they work so well. They were incredible. They go 6 feet deep with engineered soils, perforated pipe surrounded by gravel, wrapped in a cloth. And we have we worked with Professor Crum at MSU's grass, he talked about turf grass stuff. Mm-hmm. And we got a fall fescue in there that is absolutely phenomenal. Looks like a lawn, but it's not the typical lawn grass. And the roots are longer. They go down 8, 9, 10 feet. Keep it permeated in a way that the ditch can handle not only large microbursts, but it's stored within that 6-foot cavity in between the space between the rocks that we got down in there and the pipes and whatever. So when we redesign the way that we think about moving water off the surface of the earth, what we move it into is a big deal. And that can change the way the water affects the river and affects localized flooding. So if we can put it someplace where it fell, allow it to manipulate with the soil and the plants, and allow it to leave slower, we will have accomplished all of our wish list stuff. And we're moving to standards now that do just that. So we have to respond to this change in climate. And the drain code is a beautiful tool that allows us to construct and maintain these drains in that fashion. So to answer your question, yes, we are responding to the change in the weather. Yes, the weather is changing, and we're reaching into our toolbox now with new and innovative ways to do things. My office alone has invented, I don't know, we're written up in so many white papers or whatever, I don't know. We can't even keep track of all the stuff that we're doing. The engineering companies that we're hiring are just, they're hungry and they want to think outside the box and really come up with new stuff. We can no longer lean on the old book of black book of engineering anymore because it doesn't fit today's standards. So we have to think differently. We have to think outside the box and think systemically. We can't just build infrastructure to handle, you can't just build a road to move cars. The road has to become part of your community, has to accommodate biking and automobile traffic and so on. Stormwater is the same way. We want to accommodate ecosystem development and improve the quality of life for neighborhoods and keep basements dry. The Green 4 is a perfect example of that, and so is the Tower Garden one here, and so is the toll gate. All the big projects that I've done accomplish those goals. And on we haven't done the runoff numbers yet on the Green 4, but I'm almost positive it's going to be somewhere in the 90% reduction of peak runoff, even in heavy storm events. And the people there just absolutely love it. And there's another factor that you might want to consider too. If you go into Meridian Town, or into Tower Gardens here in Meridian Township, for example, we did a short study on the roads cracking up. The pipes that we put next to the road, perforated with rain gardens, the typical road when you lay it and you have curb and gutter, within the first year, it goes through one winter, it usually has hairline cracks. Usually the year after that, you start to develop larger cracks and small potholes, but the third year producing potholes. We still haven't found that many hairline cracks. It's been 8 years. So the life cycle cost of operating your roads using low impact design is a cost savings not only just for the drain, but it's a cost savings for all the other infrastructure related to it. We got to get away from this concept of, curb and gutter is okay in some places, but not every place. And we need to eliminate those obstacles to proper stormwater management and then still make it livable and attractive and comfortable for people to live there. So that's our goal. And I think my staff is doing an outstanding job. And they think I'm a little bit crazy because I come up with all these weird ideas, but whatever, But they work. And, I give lectures all over the place. And I just spoke at Olivet College, and they just kept me there for like 3 hours and asked questions and whatever. And I think
we'll try to beat that record tonight.
Yeah. Okay, I'm almost done. I just want to say that it's a pleasure.
No, you're not. You're just getting started.
I just love this.
I know there's a lot more questions up here.
I just take this opportunity to teach because if we don't know, if you personally don't know or care, people are worried about paying their light bills and their mortgage payments and going to work on time, getting the kids to school and whatever. They don't think about infrastructure. But I think we have to start teaching people how to think about it in a maybe even a casual way would be better than no way at all. So this is very important stuff, and it defines the quality of life that we are. And I'd just like one more statement to that effect. My minor in college is cultural anthropology, and if you look at cultures and how they form and die off and go away, there are 4 things that you have to have a city or a township like this. You got to have a place to flush your toilet, a place to put the storm water, a consistent source of clean drinking water with no lead in it, hopefully, and a transportation system. You take one of those things away, you can't have a village. It's just that simple. So those 4 infrastructures, except for transportation, all the rest are underground. And we're starting to bring our stormwater pipes up, opening them up and making little creeks running down the street and putting it right in people's face so they can think of it a little bit differently. And that really is the key, to get people to think about those things they can't see. Out of sight, out of mind is not a solution to these major problems we face with infrastructure across this country. So we have to start thinking differently and start producing better results with new innovative engineering that costs less money and improve our quality of life and protect the public for health, safety, and welfare.
Wow. Commissioner Kubasso, I saw you reaching for the microphone there.
No, it wasn't.
No?
We had a question from you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, a couple things. One of the dams, you're gonna take out the one at MSU?
No.
No, okay.
Could you repeat that question for the
He
tape?
wants to know if I'm going to take out the dam at MSU right near the administration building, I think, right? Yeah, that's not coming out, not that I know of. If that comes out, it's going to be between the DEQ and MSU.
And the second one, it's my understanding Meridian Township is gonna extend the river trail, following the Red Cedar to Park Lake. Have you worked with the engineers on that yet?
I've had some conversation with some of them, yes. And some of the path that is going to take is
Sorry,
is going to
one
be
more time.
along-
Could you just repeat that for the
Okay.
tape?
He
Thanks.
wants to know if there's an effort to extend the river trail in Meridian Township. And the question is whether or not I've had conversations with some of the people involved, and yes, I have. I'm not that detailed on it for this conversation, but I can tell you that any extension of those trails is a good thing. And we'll do whatever we can to accommodate a successful extension of those trails. And we still have to take care of the river too, you know. It's not just the paper cups and the debris that wind up in there that people see. It's the chemistry that you can't see that's in those rivers that need to be addressed. And that we do by managing the land, not the river. It's easy to clean up if you don't put it in.
I got a couple more questions back here.
Yes,
Yes, you mentioned drain code, is that county or state?
that's a state. She asked if I could explain the drain code a little bit. The drain code is a state law, and it's unique to Michigan. And it has an elected official in each county that is in charge of the stormwater infrastructure. And almost in every county, the elected drain commissioner, or who or she is, also plays a role of the county public works director. And we're also by law, we're state mandatory members of the Parks Board. So the drain commissioner serves those three laws. But we're also on the emergency response, first responder teams for things like tanker truck spills and all of that. Flooding incidences, my staff works 24 hours a day, sometime nonstop when we have a lot of rain. And there's about 28 different state laws that my office has to deal with, and the drain commissioner is obligated by law to do. I have to sign every plat. Every new development has to come across my desk. So we're going to be imposing these new standards on all of this new development whenever it happens. The economy is going to come back and people are going to want to build stuff. They'll knock down old stuff and build new stuff, and we have to retrofit all that new stuff, the new building and commercial development, with the proper infrastructure so that we can reach our goals and objectives for a better, clean water world. That help?
Yeah, so if you were to change the drain code in any way to improve it, what would you do?
I like the drain code the way it is. It has a lot of court cases that it's been tested, so it gives us an opportunity to say that, you know, the thing that people don't like about, everybody wants me to fix their problems, but nobody wants to pay for it. It all comes down to money. And the drain code forces people to pay their share by benefit derived. Counties, township and municipalities have to pay a share for public health, safety, and welfare. And they don't like paying that. It comes out of their general fund. But it's one of the most important things that they can invest their money in, because it is the foundation of a good society to have good running infrastructure. And while they may not think of it that way, they should. And someday, maybe everybody will be on board and understand transportation, sewage, drinking water, and stormwater, because those are the foundations of every community. And if we don't pay attention to them, and if you just slide by and let people put in stuff that doesn't work, or substandard you know, roads and infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure, drinking water. Look what happened to Flint with lead in their pipes, you know. They tried to save $80 a week by not treating that water with a prohibitor for lead. $80 a week, I mean, come on. And that came out of the governor's guy that he put in charge, executor or whatever he put in charge.
Emergency manager.
And I met with the mayor of Flint and some city council people several times now, and I'm working with the county drain commissioner up there. We're collaborating on some ideas and so on and so forth. The point is that We can't just say it's too expensive, we can't afford it. You can't not afford it in the end. Now, we don't want to just spend money to spend money. We want to make sure that everything we built works and it's worth the dime that you're putting into it. But I can tell you for a fact that low impact design is cheaper than conventional engineering, and it works better. It moves more water, slower, keeps the peak flows rates down, prevents flooding, and cleans the water at the same time. I mean, what's not to like about it? You know, it's like a good homemade pie, a cold glass of milk. I mean, what's not to like, you know?
I saw another hand in the back there.
Yes.
You've been speaking about stormwater, and that's your responsibility.
Mhm.
There's other drain systems referred to as sanitary systems.
Uh-huh.
And I've even heard in this township that sometimes those lines were laid very close to each other.
Yes.
There's been shifts of earth.
Mhm.
Some of the sanitary goes into your stuff, and that, I know that would
Okay.
make you unhappy. So is it the community's responsibility for the sanitary systems, and you're only responsible for the stormwater system?
Well, all communities have different sanitary treatment systems. Some of them have treatment plants, others use lagoon systems, and so on. And they're all approved by the DEQ. And the infrastructure that you're talking about that conflict with each other were put in the ground 50 years ago. And who knows who laid pipes back then. You know, when we run across those conflicts, the utility conflicts, we solve them. We try to solve them with the other utility. We've had gas lines drilled right through concrete storm pipes, and they put a 10-inch force main right through a 25-inch pipe. We had to call consumers, and they had to dig it up. You know, they got these guys out there with the drills, and they don't see where the things go, and they go right through our pipe. They got those drill heads that go right through concrete, and there's been about 6 or 7 of those in the last 8 years, gone right through our pipes. So we have standards for that. The gas lines are under pressure, so they can be bent and they can be deeper and shallower and whatever, and avoid our pipes. So we force all of those utilities, cable, other utilities that are under pressure, like drinking water, they can go deeper, and they have to be 5 feet below the bottom of our drain. That's our standard. Now, sometimes they can't reach 5 feet, maybe it's 4 feet, but our standard is 5. So we find those conflicts all over the place. And when we find them, we solve them. Yes?
About 5 years ago, there was an article about your operation in the Lansing State Journal, and one of the major points was that you're having a hard time from like the pipeline companies to repair their facilities or even to tell you where they are. Is that
Yeah. Yes. There are several pipeline companies that come through here, and it's a very good question because it's an infrastructure that we all drive cars, come on, and we fill it up with gas, and we need the gas. If you was to take the amount of gas that comes through those gasoline and petroleum products that come through those pipes and put them in tanker trucks, from New York to Seattle, there would be 3 abreast, touching each other. That's how many trucks we could put on the highway if we didn't put it in a pipe. So the pipe is a necessary evil, I guess you call it. Because you can take those trucks off the road, that's good, okay, and they spill. The problem is that the oil companies are regulated by the federal government. But when they come into Michigan, we have drain easements. And the rule of thumb for easements is first in time is first in right. So they have to now obey. Every time they cross about 89 of my drains or something like that. Maybe it's 189, I can't remember the number, but it's a lot. So all these crossings that they're putting all these new pipes in, we're forcing them to go 5 feet below. And I want to tell you, they don't like me. They just don't like me. And the problem with all the leaks that they've had that I've looked at, with very few exceptions, we're at the junctions of where they have shutoff valves and stuff. It's those things that leak. The Kalamazoo leak, I think, was at one of those junctions. It's not the pipe itself that leaks. But if they didn't put them deep enough, my people, when they maintain the drain with a big hydro hoe, would hit them. I've got 2 or 3 of them that run right into my drain, and they're like a dam. So we're forcing them to move those over time. Now, it's impossible for them to just click their fingers and make them go away. So we're working with them as best we can, and we've become first name basis with almost all of the pipe company foremen, or whatever they call them, the planners or for the pipelines or whatever. And we stick to it, and we make them pay for an inspector that's out there all the time that they're laying pipe. They have one of my inspectors out there, and they pay for it. And they pay for a permit, and we have everything surveyed by a surveyor, so we know exactly the depth of that pipe now. Then I talked to the guy at Enbridge Pipe Company, and he was out of Canada. And I talked to somebody there, it was one of the higher ups and whatever. I said, well, why don't you just show us where all your pipes are, and we can investigate and we can figure it all out. He says, well, I can't tell you. And I said, what do you mean you can't tell me? He says, Homeland Security, it prohibits me from telling you. Now, who in their right mind is going to go out in the cornfield and blow up a cornfield? I mean, if they want to blow up a pipeline. That really is a ridiculous statement. First of all, if they tell us where it is, why would I tell anybody? I mean, you know, if it's underground and it's safe, it doesn't matter. So that's just a ridiculous attitude. So we went through, I don't know how many thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of dollars I've got tied up in attorneys, negotiating with their attorneys just to get the information we need. Now that we won that battle, we're in the negotiating process to start lowering these pipes and put them in the proper place. We're starting with the new ones that they're putting in, and we're moving through all the other ones that are in bad shape and are not located properly or not deep enough. So some of them are like 6 inches below the bottom depth of the drain. And you know, nobody watched them going in the 1950s. Nobody cared. They just put them there. So, but we care today, and we inspect it. And they don't like me inspecting it, but I do it.
Well,
Yes.
go ahead.
So the principle earlier about benefit derived
Uh-huh.
makes sense for storm drains that are improving for and/or
Mhm.
but for something like Enbridge screwing up, or Tager going over.
Mhm. They have to pay all our costs.
They pay the cost.
They pay all.
Not us,
Nope.
taxpayers.
If there's a spill, and my crew has to respond along with the state police and any fire department that has to go out there and so on, and our crew has to then make sure that it doesn't get into our drains and so on, so we block them and whatever. There's a company that comes out and works with us to suck it up into a confined truck or whatever. And so we handle that material. They have to pay 100% of that.
That makes sense. It's just,
Yep.
but the benefit is surely to us who live around spills.
Well, you're their customer. You fill your car up with their product. Okay, and there's another thing about that. You know, there's a big battle with Ice Mountain drinking water. Do you have Ice Mountain over there on the table? Nestle company, you know, is going into the Supreme Court eventually with this issue about withdrawing water, putting it in a bottle, and making it into a saleable product. And this is my spin on that. This is a thing that I think you ought to keep your eye on and perhaps get involved in. The Great Lakes has 20% of the available fresh water in the world. Because we have so much water, even when it rains, we think we got so much that we don't have to worry about it. Well, here's where we draw a line in the sand, and this is where we should start taking care of this water. We should have policies and directives that maintain this water in a health and safe fashion, right? Now, that oil company that's pumping gallons, millions of gallons of gasoline and petroleum products through that pipe, they told me they're making somewhere around $0.05 a gallon. If Nestle is right and they win their suit, water withdrawal is going to be called a commodity. And under the commerce laws, including NAFTA, they can't stop them from selling it outside the Great Lakes Basin. If they take the oil out of those pipes and put Great Lakes water into them and run them to Texaco or Texas and Arizona and Mexico City, they'll get about $11.80 a gallon profit instead of $0.05. Now, you don't think there's some incentive in there for them to negotiate this issue? And they're going to spend millions of dollars to defend their right to take that water out, and they're going to argue, in the end, they're going to argue it's a commodity and they can't stop it from leaving here. And there's several lawsuits going on right now. They just submitted a request to improve up near Hershey, Michigan, to get 3 times more water extraction out of the ground is what they have now. And I don't buy Nestle products. That's just my own personal choice, but I fight back with my dollar that way. I won't even buy Nestle chocolate chips, you know?
So to continue in that question, do you have any thoughts on the fact that the withdrawal permit for the Karagandi pipeline is actually 85 MGD? They don't need 85 MGD for Genesee County or Flint.
Well, they
Anything
plan
close
on-
to that.
That's correct. And that's a gray issue in terms of supplying fresh water to citizens through a municipally owned utility. It's different than a company coming in here and taking the
No,
water and
I'm talking about
manipulating
why did they get 85
it.
MGD?
Oh, I can't answer that question, I don't know.
Because they don't need 85 MGD, but that's what the permit's for.
Well, they have commitments from townships outside of Genesee
They
County.
still don't need anything close to 85. I can guarantee you that.
Well, you and Jeff Wright, the drain commissioner from Genesee County, should have a conversation.
It would be interesting.
Yeah, I'll try to set up a lunch for the three of us.
If I could bring you back to some township issues, we were talking about constructed wetlands and other measures that we can take to mitigate these flash floods, the peak storm events. So the Meridian Township has a development policy of no net loss of wetland, and this commission gets involved in reviewing development projects that have some wetland impact to make sure that at least any wetland that's impacted is compensated with some mitigation measures. So I guess a couple of questions. The consultants that the township uses assess the success of those mitigations quite high. As far as they're concerned, most of the wetland mitigation that's been done in Meridian Township is working. It's doing what it was meant to do. So the first question is that your impression? And the second is, going forward, is no net loss a sufficient policy for a township like Meridian?
No net loss, my personal preference is 1.5 to 2 times the volume. So if they destroy an acre of wetland, they should put in 2. That's my opinion. The compacted soils in a wetland, once you start making a wetland out of an open field and you create a new one, it would be comparing a Monet to a Velvet Elvis. I mean, there's just no comparison to a naturally developed wetland.
You had some good-looking Velvet Elvises there.
Yes, I
earlier
know.
on.
And I'm not arguing that you can't build one. I'm only arguing that to preserve them would be better. That's the first thing that should happen, is to try to preserve the existing wetlands.
Right.
Even the 1/10 of an acre ones, the vernal wetlands that provide habitat for tree frogs and salamander eggs and so on and so forth. All of those are so important to our ecosystem. So if there's a way to build around it, or to reconfigure the subdivision in a way, or the shopping center to accommodate it, then you should save them. If there isn't, okay, fine. Then you should go to great lengths to make sure that you're putting in something that's not a Velvet Elvis.
Any other questions from other commissioners? Please.
I had a question about who is developing the new standards?
My office.
Okay. And I had a question slash
I
suggestion.
have to sign them and approve them.
Oh, very good. Have you considered going into the local schools, whether high schools or middle schools, to talk to kids about this? Because, I mean, career options right there.
Sure.
Engineering, I mean,
I've
for
met with
one,
the Okemos Environmental Club from Okemos High School, and they want to build some rain gardens on Okemos High School's campus, so we're going to help them. I got 2 engineers from 2 different companies that's going to donate their time and energy to build and design and draw the plans for 2 rain gardens along the south side of Okemos, and they have to go through the school board permission and all these things, so they have to go through that. And I don't know where that is right now. I was going to try to call, I thought maybe it might come up, but I was going to try to call my engineers to see how far along they are on the plans. But they're going to develop plans, and then these kids are going to try to raise money and build them and so on and so forth. And yes, I talk to schools all the time. I lecture at least 3 or 4 places a month, and my lectures range everything from high school classes to engineering classes to fishery and wildlife. I just spent 3 hours of lectures at Ovid College, or Olivet College, I mean. And a very nice campus, by the way. You know, the town of Olivet has like 300 people in it, and there's 1,000 students, like overwhelmed. Yeah, East Lansing, there's nothing to compare to the population difference in East Lansing. There's less students, or there's a lot of students. I have 50,000 students out there, but it's not like Olivet, I mean. It's interesting. Some very dedicated teachers there. It's a great college. I was absolutely impressed. But I lecture all the time to answer your question.
Thank you.
All over the place. To anybody that, I'll preach clean water to anybody, any place.
Okay.
I'm just curious if you're familiar with a company by the name of Arjana, and if so, if you have any thoughts on their product.
Can you tell me a little bit about them?
They apparently have a system where they claim to be able to fairly inexpensively direct surface water into
To the ground. Yeah, it's a plastic tube, and they drill it through the ground. I'm very familiar with it. They asked me to endorse their product, and I wouldn't. They wanted to, their pitch when they talked to me, I met with them, they wanted me to endorse their product for draining wetlands, basically. And I refused to do that. So they don't have my endorsement for that. But if somebody's got a backyard that's wet, the way it works is the water pressure itself forms a pump in this soft plastic, and it pumps itself down into the ground, usually 8, 9, 10 feet, something like that. I suppose that's okay for some golf course to get rid of some of the water on some of the fairways and that kind of thing, or maybe some backyards can do it. The thing actually works. But I'm afraid that if you give a tool like that to a bunch of developers and turn them loose on land that they want to build more houses on, I think it might be a recipe for disaster. I would rather build around the wetlands. Anytime you want to, you wage war with water, water always wins. So to get a land use development policy through any municipality that protects all of those minor wet spots and so on, you can build around them and enhance them even, is better. But I understand that the roads have to go a certain way, and there's certain safety factors with the width of road for fire trucks and ambulances and traffic and so on and so forth, and you have to destroy a wetland sometimes. But when you do that, you should make sure that when you build it right, and you take great care to make sure that the constructed wetlands actually function as a decent ecosystem. Recharging water into the ground in general is away from its natural recharge areas. There's about 15 recharges areas in Ingham County that are mapped out, and we know where they are, and they usually take water pretty deep. But forcing water into the ground through a pump system of any kind and having that water go deep, all you're doing is taking the pollution from that water on the surface and putting it down into our aquifers. That's not right either. Keep it on the surface if you can. I mean, we've covered up most of our recharge areas around here with parking lots. And I can show you all those. I got a map of all those. And the idea is that when we build the parking lots next time, the new parking lot should be aware of that. And we should arrange some way to continue that natural area recharge. But forced recharge into deep ground wells, or they're called recharge wells, isn't a good idea. I did a very long study on those back in 76, 77, 78. And I was thinking of using them on the toll gate drain, but I found out the bacteria that you can spread and the pollution you can put into our drinking water is just horrendous, and you can't retrieve it, you can't fix it. Once it's down there, it's very expensive to get rid of, and you can't correct it. So these shallow pumps, fine. I mean, they're good for certain things. I'm afraid that they're going to go out of hand, and people will buy them at Lowe's and start draining everything that they don't want wet, and before you know it, the ecosystem's changed again. So, I just think they should be licensed, and they should have a certified civil engineer look at it, make sure that he's not destroying something in the process of trying to drain something. That's my opinion about them. So.
We've got one last question over here.
Yes.
Ann Arbor was in the news this year about some plumes that have been over decades going towards their water supply. Do we have anything like that here?
We have, these are underground plumes, right? Okay, we get our drinking water primarily from Saginaw Formation, and The water that comes out of the Saginaw is a very large sheet of concaved sandstone. It actually pops up in Huts, or the bay up near Saginaw Bay. And it also goes up into Lake Michigan. It sticks out when you go down into Lake Michigan. You can see it on the geological map. It's a very fascinating sandstone. We get our water, a lot of the water from that. There are several industrial areas in Ingham County that have contributed pollution to that aquifer. One of them is the Goodyear site on Lake Lansing Road near the Groesbeck Park Drain. And Goodyear Tire Company, which owned Motor Wheel, is managing that landfill right now. And they are sucking the water out. That plume is about 2.5 miles long. It goes from somewhere near the corner of Wood Street and Lake Lansing, and it goes as far as the intersection of Pennsylvania Avenue. And Goodyear has done a very, very good job of back flushing that out. And they have, if you go to Old Town and you look at the Brinky Fish Ladder, come right over to the north by the Clark Hill law offices there. You'll see a 36-inch pipe coming out of the ground. That's the Groesbeck Park Drain. Goodyear actually rents that drain from me to discharge the water after they clean it, and they put it in the Grand River. And that goes about 2.5 miles of piping that I put under there for that particular drain. The Board of Water and Light has some plume. They've handled that. They've spent millions of dollars to correct that. There are a lot of other industrial sites around here that have some aquifer damage attributed to their sites, but they're all being caught and managed. So, and Goodyear, I have to give a plug for Goodyear. You know, we allowed them to do that back in the 40s, and they provided a lot of jobs. They paid a lot of property taxes, put kids to school. It's part of our responsibility now not to condemn them for it because we allowed it, but we got to work with them to solve it. And they're willing to pay the bill, so fine, let's do it and work with them. And I'm not condemning them for having it there, but we're changing their attitude about cleaning it up, and they've been really been good stewards. So the answer to the question is yes, they exist, and they exist in Ann Arbor, they exist here. They exist in Grand Rapids too. Any other questions?
Well, I have about 100,000 more questions, but I'll let you go.
I can talk.
Thank you once again for coming. It's been
All
a
right.
great
Well, thank you.
experience.